You're listening to the Vint Podcast, where we bring you interviews and stories from around the world of wine and spirits. From winemakers and critics to sommeliers and master distillers, we'll explore the people and businesses who are instrumental in shaping the future of today's food and drinks culture. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Vint Podcast. My name is Billy, and as always, we are presented by Coravin. Coravin is the world leader in in-home wine preservation, allowing you to pour a glass of your favorite wine and enjoy more bottles in your cellar without ever having to pop the cork. We are back today with a really exciting interview. We are interviewing Gaia from the famous Gaja family. We have a really great interview with her where we cover all of the wines that they produce. We hear a little bit about the family heritage. She goes into some detail about what her dad, Angelo Gaja, is doing now. He was so influential in really putting Gaia on the map, and he's still constantly pushing the family to innovate. It's really interesting to hear how Gaia and her siblings have taken on the mantle of what it means to make Gaia wines, both in Barbaresco, but also in their properties in Tuscany and even down in Sicily now, where they're also making some wine. It's really interesting to see how the family's kind of dynamic ethos and penchant for really making high quality wines has come through. And Gaia gives us a lot of her time, which is why we're going to keep this intro short today. Gaia talks about a little bit about the family's beginnings, kind of what her grandfather's vision for wines were. For those who don't know, the family has been making wines for over a century. So the family had a lot of background before Angelo kind of came on the scene and really transformed the way that they were doing things and really put Barbaresco on the map. So it was really interesting to hear a little bit about that background, their vision for the future, what they're continuing to do to make their wines as great as they can. Nothing's ever finished. And it's really interesting to see what their vision is and how they're continuing to really set the benchmark for really high quality wines, not just in Barbaresco, but Piemonte and the world as a whole. So we're going to shortly get to the interview with Gaia. But before we do, remember, if you're trying to drink more wines from your cellar without worrying about waste and wine you can't consume, you should look into Coravin. It will be one of your best friends. And if you would like to buy Coravin of your own, you can use code VINT15 for 15% off your purchase on the Coravin website. Also, remember, if you're a member of the trade, just visit trade.coravin.com for exclusive discounts on the range of products and accessories for work. And now, without further ado, here is our interview with Gaia Gaja. Hi, Gaia. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, we've been really wanting to have somebody from, actually, I think you might be our first Italian producer that we've talked to from the north. We talked to Frank Cornelissen from Sicily, but it's a very different world up in Piemonte. And I'm really excited to have you on and to talk about your family's winery and what all the exciting things you guys are doing with it. So could you just give us like a little bit of background on who you are and you are in the family, and then we'll dive into a little deeper questions?
I have a very easy name. My name is Gaia Gaja. I'm the firstborn of my father Angelo and my mother Lucia. And since 20 years, I'm working with my parents, together with my sister Rossana and my brother Giovanni. But my father as well and my mom, they're still involved. The family all lives in Barbaresco, where our historic Gaia winery is located. And so we represent the fifth generation. The most historic wine we always made is Barbaresco. So we continue to focus a lot on Barbaresco, but we also have some vineyards in the Barolo area. So we also make Barolo. And since 40 years, we also have a small production of Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. My father in the early 90s also started to produce wine in Toscana. So in 93, we bought a little winery in Montalcino. It's called Pieve Santa Restituta. We produce only Sangiovese, only Brunello. In 96, we developed in Bolgheri, on the seaside of Toscana, a winery that is called Camarcanda. Bolgheri is the land of the eclectic noble families, very international. And so it's the place of Italy where international variety have been planted since a long time. And so we focus on Cabernet Franc, on Cabernet Sauvignon mainly. And my father is volcanic. And so now he's a Vulcano on the Vulcano, because a few years ago we started a joint venture with a local producer from Etna. And if someone heard me speaking before, then knows that it's 20 years that we talk a lot about climate change and thinking of going on it now, which is one of the highest in altitude regions of Europe with very, very late ripening variety, was something that at the end intrigued us a lot. And so we started the project there.
Wow, that's so much. So in the winery now, you handle a lot of the day-to-day stuff, but then you also are now the traveling face. You've taken that over from your dad, traveling around the world promoting Gaia. How do you balance those? And do you prefer to be at home, kind of more hands-on in the vineyards and winery, or do you like spreading the word?
Learning from what my father always did. My father has always been involved in everything. So in his more than 60 years of career, he has been strongly behind decisions of viticulture, winemaking, the decision of coming out with a new wine, starting a new project. So I think that the great advantage, the great privilege of being in a family business is that I can truly be involved in everything. And I think that to take a decision, it's easier to, you feel more confident to take a decision if you are involved in every aspect and not just in one. So together with my siblings, and I must say that we are all, at the moment, I'm very happy because we are all three of us, we're on the same level of knowledge and engagement and involvement. And we love so much our reality, what we do, that we want to be involved in every aspect. I'm involved as Giovanni and Rossana as well. We are involved in projects in viticulture. Every week we taste with the winemakers, and so we are involved in the decisions of the seller decisions. And all of us, we travel a bit. It's true that I've been the one traveling the most, also because I started to work before them. And for a few years, I was only traveling and only being the face. And then I started to be more involved also in other aspects. Today, in the last 2-3 years, my brother took over a lot. So I'm staying a little bit more home because there is a lot to do here. And it's Gaia, but there is also Toscana. And so I'm traveling a little bit less, even though I continue to travel. But Giovanni is traveling the most right now.
When you think about your father's legacy at the estate and now you and your siblings, is the thing that is at the forefront of your mind, is it preserving the tradition and preserving sort of the style and the process that your father established? Or is it more so weighted towards looking farther ahead to the future and innovation and these kinds of things? Or is it just like a balance that you try and find?
See, it's the beauty of a legacy. I see it as a bond between us and people that are no longer there or people that are not existing yet.
Sure.
And I love the idea that a dream of someone, that was the dream of my grandfather or my great-grandfather, didn't die with him, but continues. And I am putting all of myself, all of my passions and efforts in my everyday work, which is not really a work, is my lifestyle. Wine for me is everything. It's my work, it's my passion, it's my family. And I love to think that I'm bringing forward his project and that hopefully there's going to be someone after me that bring it forward. So I like the idea that there is an advantage in having a legacy. You can continue year after year to go forward. My goal is not, I'm not really thinking about a specific technique in the making of the wine. Definitely in my family, there are certain values, there is a sense of taste, a sense of style, a way of doing things. And I feel that we implement those values and that style in our way of being and doing. The thing that my father taught me with the example the most is always to look forward. I'm really amazed to see how my father, even now that he's 84 years old, never says something nostalgic. Never. I never hear him talking about the past with a nostalgia. For him, the best still has to come. And that's inspiring. And so I think that there are occasions every day of starting a new experiment and try to improve. There are endless ways to improve. So I think that is my mission. I say that my work is like imagine a necklace made of rings, one ring after the other, and every ring is one tiny detail of our work. Every tiny detail can be explored in different ways. And there is never the best way, because every time you do something, you have to accept some sort of compromises. Maybe most of it is a good decision, but there is always something that is really not so positive. So you always try to cope with the little imperfections and trying to improve. You never finish to do that.
On that note, I read a quote that said, or that you said, your father has always told you to leave 30% in doubt of anything that you're doing. What does that mean? I didn't quite understand that.
He says that we have to believe in what we do, but we always have to leave 30% to doubt, meaning that you never have to be dogmatic. You really have to fight with yourself in not being so sure and convinced that what you do is the best. Even though when you work and you believe in what you do, you think that is the best thing. But there is, as we said before, there is always margin for improvement. So imagine when in the winery, we have, in the last 20 years, we started to collaborate with some external consultants, entomologists, botanists, geologists, genetists. With each one of them, we started to new project, and we started certain experiments inside the vineyards. So when you put in place an experiment, it takes a lot of energy, it's a cost, time cost, and you have to repeat it at least for 4 or 5 years before you have a clue, an idea of what is the result of that experiment. So just the fact that you put in place an experiment is because you believe in it. And so when at the end of the year, it's time to go in the vineyard and check the results, you want to see only the good side. Did you see it worked? So my father is the one that he's searching for other people, other botanists that have a completely different opinion from brings them in. And there is always a comment that proves that what we did is not working 100%. So you always have to leave space to doubt. Otherwise, there is no improvement.
Yeah, your father doesn't sound like someone who's been just sitting around the table drinking his own wines for the last 50 years. He probably does a lot of exploration and understands how other folks do things as well. Is that correct?
Yes. Sometimes you have to calm him down because he's too progressive. You have to put some brakes.
Is it tough not to just want to drink your own wine all the time? It's such qualities and access to the cellar, but...
Well, ask me, what do you drink at all? There are several vintages where we don't make wine because now we got hail, was a terrible vintage, and that's what I drink.
Nice.
So on that topic, can you talk a little bit more? I guess we'll dive into the wines here. Can we talk a little bit about your guys' core Barbaresco range and how, I don't know, what differentiates you, how you guys are basically like very benchmark Barbaresco, but at the same time you did things a little differently than everybody else and you're continuing to explore what makes the Gaia wine so special? I know that's a big question.
No, it is difficult to answer without sounding arrogant or pompous. I think that my grandfather as well, not just my father, they brought a different attitude. Being a producer of Barbaresco, respected to a producer of Barolo, it meant that you always had a complex of inferiority. Barbaresco was considered like a Barolo, but never such, not as structured, not as ageable, not as powerful. So it was like a Barolo, but less. And the complex of inferiority can continue making other comparison with our wines, other wines. So I think that what has been different has been the strong confidence and belief. So it was the attitude that made my grandfather and then my father approach things with a different proudness. And I think that the attitude was special. My grandfather always believed that Barbaresco was the best wine in the world. And actually, you were mentioning before. So we drink wines from all over the world. Actually, my grandfather was drinking only Barbaresco and was drinking only his Barbaresco. Barely, sometimes he was drinking a Barolo, but he never drank a Bordeaux, never drank a Burgundy. And still, he was convinced that Barbaresco was the best wine in the world. But he had a faith, a belief that also blindly made him waste opportunities because, for example, my grandfather from the 30s to the 70s, she really focused in trying to buy the best vineyards of the village of Barbaresco. And even when he got offered some amazing cruise in Barolo, was not interested. Maybe that was a mistake. But Barbaresco was the village that he knew by heart, was the one that he believed in. And he was the one that started selling in bulk all the vintages that, in his opinion, were not at the quality level that his Barbaresco needed to have. So I think I always think about this, that probably having a little disadvantage of being in Barbaresco and not in Barolo gave him more commitment and in taking drastic decision to make a point. When my father joined the winery, that was 1961, my father was not allowed in the cellar. So my grandfather made him work only in the vineyards from 1961 to 1967. And I think that really my father was the first one in the area that truly started to make a green harvest. So at the time, the prunings were very different from today. Prunings were 18 gems, 20 gems. So plants were carrying a lot of bunches. They were carrying almost 20 bunches. So the green harvest is something that my father introduced at the beginning of the 70s. And then introduced short pruning. So a lot of focus of my father in the 60s and 70s were to try to reduce production, because it was the only way to have a more consistent quality year after year. And other things, he tried with a little bit higher density of plants per hectare. We planted a vineyard, the Varietals, in the late 60s. It was 6,000 plants per hectare. The own vineyards in Barbaresco and Barolo are 4,500 plants per hectare. So he increased of 1,500 plants per hectare the density. And then he introduced the concept of single vineyards in Barbaresco. Our most historic wine, the Barbaresco, is a blend of different vineyards, but then he started to create a pyramid of quality and to focus also on site identity Nebbiolo. Site produces single vineyard, Sori San Lorenzo, Costa Russi, Soritilline, so introduced a lot of ideas. For me, the wine that I am more connected with is the Barbaresco. The Barbaresco, because that's my wine, the wine of my father, of my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather. So I really feel a strong connection with that wine. And it's often when I smell Barbaresco, are coming out perfumes that brings me in a place. They remind me something that is not even easy to describe, and so it's difficult to communicate to someone else what that perfume reminds me of. Reminds me, my grandfather from my mom's side, he is also from Barbaresco. He also had a little cellar. So my grandfather from my mom's side, he had a little room in the house. It was a room where there was no floor. There was just very compact soil, right? And that room was a room where he had hammers. He was adjusting things. He was storing the wood to start the fire. So thin wood pieces. He had bigger wood pieces to make the fire go. He was storing like apples, fruit, because it was a dark and cold place. So it was fantastic to store the fruit during the winter. And there was a perfume in that place that I have never smelled anymore. And I don't know anymore if someone in the house has a place like that. And so it's a smell that I don't know where to go to find for. If I smell Barbaresco, it reminds me that. So it's a wine that really talks about where I'm from, memories of childhood, it's the wine that speaks really loud to me.
Yeah, I think my grandmother had a cellar similar to that. Part of it was finished and had concrete, and part of it was dirt floor, like you're saying, and they kept potatoes and onions and things like that back in there. And especially those kinds of foods, like it's that earthy smell, but also when it gets a little older, it's like bruised and sweet smelling.
Yeah, and
It's and humid, yeah, and damp. I can resonate with that and understand it. Yeah, the fact that you can identify with one of your own memories that way, but you also know is indicative of just place in general. The fact that translates to the wine, and you can tell that sort of in your story of the estate and of the wines that you produce is, I think, probably really compelling for folks. So the sense of place, right? Is that a big part of we think about place with Burgundy especially, right? And wines of terroir, but this is massively important in Barbaresco.
Yeah, to express the wine, express the sense of place. I always say this. I say that you can store memories in a library, you can store it in a computer, you can store it into a bottle of wine. The wine is the memory of that place, and wine is not just the product of grapes, and it's not just even the product of a vine. I think that is much more than that. Are all the microorganisms that are living in the soil underground, that they live in symbiosis with the roots, are the funguses, the enzymes that are living under the trunk of the plant. Is the contribution of all that life that there is in a piece of land. A piece of land is a universe. And that's why sometimes the wine, they surprise you. When they go and they stay in the glass, or when you taste the same bottle after 2-3 days, it's always a surprise to see which perfumes are coming out from that glass.
So you guys are definitely very big into like sustainability and trying to work well and obviously in conjunction with the environment and support it. How have you seen with if there's like climate change or things happening, has it changed how the expression of Barbaresco or the wines are expressing themselves, or are you seeing any changes in the single vineyards expressions at all?
So connected to what I just said, I think that the most alive is a place, is a piece of land. The more chances there is for a wine to express vitality and youth and complexity. Definitely imagine if you have a prolonged drought year after year after year, you have a very long period with hot weather, with high temperatures. I think that something dies in the soil. I really think that the climate change is changing terroir. Some microorganisms are dying in the soil when you have a prolonged drought, which is the opposite of life. And when you have 40 degrees outside, soil can become even hotter. I think the goal is to keep the soils alive. The amount of organic matter that there is in the soil is going down. It's going down because it's mineralized by the high temperature. Because if you don't have enough water, or if it's too hot, it's difficult, for example, grass to grow. If you live in a place that is a place of monoculture, there are no impollinators or birds that can bring in your vineyard the different types of grass and flowers. And so the soil lacks of it. And then, of course, if the producer is working with the herbicide or chemical product, is one added challenge for life to go forward. So I think that a bit the challenge now is that one, to increase, to keep the organic matter, to keep life in the soil to a good level. Nevertheless, there are not just, this is a concern we have. The concern is also that it's not always the quality that is in danger, but it's the elegance of wines, the fleeting, delicate notes. Because if you have in the sky a big constant working every day, you get just riper and riper grapes. And I think that becomes a little bit more narrow, the expression of flowers, the expression of more delicate fruit becomes more concentrated, even the nose, but a little bit more narrow. Nevertheless, I'm not disappointed about what I'm releasing right now, which is Barbaresco 2021, which is a fantastic vintage and is a great vintage. Also 2020 was a good vintage, also 19, also 18, also 17. This is also an effect of climate change. Maybe it's us that we are more experienced and we're doing a better job, but I really think it's the sun that is giving us more consistently ripe grapes. So in the past, when my grandfather was making the wine, it was not like that at all. In the 60s, the 70s, 50s, it really made sense to talk about great vintages because you had 3 great vintages among the mediocre ones. Today, we have so many good vintages. Still, great vintages are rare. They lose a little bit of their meaning because they're surrounded by many other good ones. But this great quality that consistently we are able to releasing year after year is also because we don't have the difficulties of the past. The difficulties of the past were the grapes, they were never ripening fully. Today, they do. So there is also a good side.
Yeah, can you talk about the maybe Barbaresco more broadly and any of the style changes? Do you see that across estates around you? And maybe just talk about the balance of that fruit ripening and the importance of acidity still in the wines and what that balance is like across the region, just a little bit zoomed out from Gaia.
My feeling is that for wine lovers, this is the best moment ever to enjoy Barolo and Barbaresco. I think that the quality that is coming out today is overall to a level that we never saw in the past. Even now, now more than 20, 30, 40 years ago. Why that? Also because that this is an area where, also because of my father, new ideas, the style changed a lot in the 80s, 90s. This is something quite redundant and we are over it. But for 20, 30 years, there has been a big friction between the traditionalist and the modernist. So I think that the terroir had challenges in coming out clearly from the wines, because imagine that if the same vineyard was from that same vineyard, 2 wines were made by 2 different producers, one using big, very, very old oak cask, the other one using young barrique, one doing no short pruning, no green harvest, the other one doing extreme reshaping of the bunches and very tiny production. The wines they looked so different because they had, and then they were doing 2 completely different management of the oak, different kind of fermentation. So you had 2 wines uncomparable. So I think that now we are in a fantastic moment because we are over the modernist, we are over the traditionalist. We are in a moment of post-modernism, in a moment when I think that overall every producer is taking the best from the tradition. So the wines they have a transparency. They are not loaded by new oak. They do enough macerations with the skins to gain a good structure. And on the same time, there is also the best expression of modernism. The wines are pure, are clean. They don't show, they have a clarity. Expression of sight comes if there is a clarity and there is a nice ripeness of the fruit. So now is really a great moment.
Yeah, I was reading some comments that you made, I believe, to Monica Larner at Robert Parker when I think she was tasting maybe the 2019, 2020 vintage. But you talked about the 2018 being more structured and vertical, is what you said. Can you talk about what that means, and does that relate? What does vertical mean when you think about these wines? Does that relate to structure and acidity or opulence? Yeah.
I think I was talking about the 19 that for me is vertical because it's a vintage where the wine has very straightforward, sharp tannins. They go straight down the palate. And also it's a vintage that has a very good acidity. So the wine seems to be framed by tannins and acidity. And in that sense, when it's in my mouth, give me a sense of verticality.
Uh-huh.
For example, 2021, it's a vintage that has so much density that is wider, it enters in a round, creamy way. So it's more horizontal, I say. Is one thing I notice is that Nebbiolo, which is a variety that has always been considered one of the most austere varieties, with the most firm, austere tannins and acidity, it's a variety that today also shows a juiciness. And it's funny because Nebbiolo has always been the opposite of juicy. But a vintage like 2021, a vintage like 2020, they are juicy. There is that transparency of Nebbiolo seems to be a little bit more, to have more flesh around the tannins.
It sounds like that's a style that you tend to like, the more mouth-filling, horizontal, as you say, versus more vertical and structured, or what's your preference?
But right now, I'm really happy with 2021. It's a vintage that has opulence, and I was missing it because the 2020, it's a vintage where all the finesse of Nebbiolo comes out. It's very elegant. It's a medium body. 2018, again, was more on the light side. Was actually 18 was a vintage where we got a lot of rains. So the berries, they were pretty big. There was a thinner skin, and so you can feel that lightness in the structure. And and in next year we will come out with 22, which is also a beautiful vintage, but it's a medium structure. 23 will be as well. So it was a while that we were not getting full structure, and I was missing it. It's not that I like, well, I like balance. I love acidity into the wines. What I love of Nebbiolo is the transparency. I really like this discreteness. It's a wine that almost, how can I say, when you drink a Nebbiolo, the taste vanish from your mouth. The taste will grow at the end of your tongue, on your throat, on your chest. You feel the taste there. It's a variety that stays back. I love that. And in the mouth, you remain with the structure. Tannins, acidity. And both of them, they tend to clean your palate. And so you end up with a sense of cleanness, of freshness. I find this quite unique of Nebbiolo.
That's awesome. That's a great. I'm going to think about that next time I taste your wines or any Nebbiolo, actually. I've also, in my research, saw that you referenced Lalou Leroy and Egon Muller as some winemakers you admire. What is it about their wines or their way of making wines that you think are interesting and that you try to take inspiration from?
Well, yeah, remember I said that I had to come up with some names. There are many people I so I can tell you even others in this chat we're having now. But for example, of Lalou Leroy, I like her very strong personality. She's a woman that doesn't listen to anyone but her own instinct and idea, and she goes often takes a very challenging decision, and then the other follow. Right now in Burgundy, many people are following her new way of managing the vineyards. She's a leader. She's leading since many years. I like this strong personality of her. And Egon Muller, I like him because he makes some amazing wines, but he seems almost not to know that. It seems so easy and so humble. And actually, humbleness is something that I always end up admiring in many great people. So I like his humbleness, but his wines, they have a purity. I love the fact that how often with Nebbiolo, and I disagree with that, with Nebbiolo there is this idea that Nebbiolo, the beginning is undrinkable. You have to wait. And then after 10 years, it's finally drinkable. I totally disagree with that, especially now. Maybe it was like that in the past. It's true that 1971, it took forever to open up. Now it's great. But what I like of Egon Muller wines is that they, from the day one, they are super expressive and very enjoyable. And at the same time, you can age them for a long time. But there are other people I admire a lot. People like Valentini from Abruzzo. Valentini with Trebbiano, which is a variety that is often considered almost useless. In France, it's called Uni Blanc, and they distill it immediately to make cognac. And him with a variety that means nothing, he showed what a complex and ageable wine could be made. A person like that gives a hope to every producer that is working with any variety.
That's awesome. I also just love the idea of Trebbiano being almost useless, because I do enjoy a lot of people are making some wines out of that, but I love that comment. So I guess pivoting a little bit from Barbaresco over to the other wines, the wines that you're making in different regions, how have like the family's approach to winemaking translated there, or did you guys try to go and try to learn how it was traditionally done in that area and then put your own spin on it, or did you guys immediately just go in and say, we want to try doing this completely in a new way?
No, I didn't notice at the beginning. Other people, they showed me. But probably when we arrived in Montalcino, we made Sangiovese look almost like a Nebbiolo. We approached Sangiovese as a Nebbiolo. And if you taste the first vintages of our Brunello, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, you feel more our Piemontese style, you feel more our hand than Montalcino itself. They are aging beautifully and I love them. But I feel that today the character of Montalcino is coming out more. I feel that the wines, they express more the perfume of these incredible woods. They have a minerality. Often the wines from Montalcino, they remind me a bit of Pietrafocaia. How do you call Pietrafocaia? They're like a stone. They have something of a cooked stone. I feel more the character of the area coming out. Not that I didn't like the previous vintages, but definitely they had more austerity in tannins, in acidity, than the wines that we make today. So probably it took us a while, even though Nebbiolo and Sangiovese, they have so many similarities. Nevertheless, and it's big botti or barrique, but similar, no? Also in Montalcino, there has been a bit the traditionalist, the modernist, the strongest in Barolo and Barbaresco, but the tools are those. I feel that today we have been it took a while to understand the vineyards and how to treat Sangiovese. It's an area that I has an incredible potential. Still, I think so much can come out from Montalcino, but it's different from Barolo. I think that I believe that Barolo and Barbaresco are really a rare place in the world, because it's a place where you have a complexity of the terroir. You come here, all these rolling hills with different altitude, steepness, and shapes, convex or concave. You see them and you taste them in the wines. So the morphology, the soils are very complex. On top of that, there is a variety like Nebbiolo. It is at least 800 years that is cultivated on these hills. So it's a variety that is very adapted and is a very terroir-driven variety. Meaning that is a variety that is dominated by terroir. And third, it's an area, this one, where there is a very, very historic farming culture. There is a community, there is a know-how, common know-how that has been going on for hundreds of years. So to find the three things is not easy. Like in Montalcino, it's an area that is also very, very complex. Probably morphological is even, and you have even more types of soil than you have here in Barolo and Barbaresco. Here is limestone and clay of geologic different eras with a little bit more of sand or less, but in Barolo and Barbaresco is limestone and clay. You go to Montalcino, We have Chiesa Santa Restituta is an estate where in the center there is a very historic church. It's the oldest church of the area. It's from the 400. And then there is a vineyard behind the church that has a sandy soil. One on the right that has a lot of galestro and bubbles. One on the left, you go and every time you walk in that vineyard, you find a fossil of marine origin. And there are so many different types of soil. And it's a big mountain, Montalcino. So you have even more altitudes than here. So it's very complex. You have a variety like Sangiovese that is very terroir driven as well. But there is not that deep farming culture that we have here. There is not, for example, the concept of terroir so deep as we have it here. In Barolo and Barbaresco, the vineyards have always been on purpose planted in certain places. Nebbiolo has always been planted in Rabaia, in Asili, in Canubi, in Cerecchio, in certain places over and over because people knew that was the place. Montalcino doesn't have that. In Montalcino, Sangiovese was planted around the church, the abbey, the monastery, near the tower or the castle. No? So it's a different, the culture is different. So, no, I think that the terroir is unbelievable, the variety as well. The new generations, the producers that are now, again, they have that confidence on the greatness of Sangiovese. I think that the quality also, I'm positive that keeps growing because there is a more conviction of the path to follow. And if I look at Bolgheri, where we have Camarcanda, Bolgheri as well is a place, is a flat piece of land between the seaside. On one side you have the coast, the Tyrrhenian coast, and on the other side you have mountains. They are called the Metallifere Mountain, metal mountains. They have a lot of these mist mines. So are mountains where they were extracting calcar, copper, iron. And so from those mountains, a lot of different types of soil came down. So there is a terroir which is not known. I think that there is a lot that we still have to study about because Bolgheri, it's a recent wine region. It's a wine region that really started to burst in the 80s. Has a shorter history. You don't have to be surprised if we work with Cabernet Franc, but also with Syrah, also with Sangiovese, also with Fiano d'Avellino, also with Vermentino, Viognier. I think that there is a lot to study and to experiment because there are a lot of different types of soil and we don't know clearly yet which soil match which variety the best. I love Bolgheri because it's the land of freedom. You don't have to follow certain rules. There are rules, but they're definitely a little bit lighter. It's a place where you work with blends, and it's a place where there is not precise historic style. That's also why probably under the sun of Bolgheri, wineries make very different types of wines. There is a variety like the Bordeaux varieties that are more dominant variety. They dominate terroir. So obviously a Cabernet growing on a gravel or on a clay soil gives you two different wine. But it's not that striking, the different, not as loud as it is with Nebbiolo or with Sangiovese. And no, it's Camarcanda is a winery I'm very close to because I started to work in 2004. And Camarcanda made his first vintage in 2000. And I was a little bit more shy to ask or to propose things in Barbaresco where there was an historic winemaker that I was not daring of proposing crazy ideas. But in Bolgheri, a new team, young, ready to do many more experiments. So it's a place where I've been learning a lot.
Before we wrap up here, I wanted to hear your perspective on the Chardonnay, the Gaia and Ray Chardonnay, and how that sort of changed the trajectory a little bit of the estate or changed maybe perception of some of the winemaking at the estate and just the impact of that wine in the portfolio and how you think of the Chardonnay production.
was that wine made us understand very quickly what a potential there was, because the first vintage of Gaia came out in 1983, and it has been a success year after year. It has been an incredible success. Sometimes I travel. It happened to me in these 20 years that I've been traveling. It happened to me more than 10 times that talking, I do winemaker dinners, then I talk with the people that are coming at the winemaker dinner. It happened to be at least 10 times that someone told me, it was a wonderful dinner and we learned a lot tonight. We didn't know that you make red wines. So there are some people that know us and they follow us and they love Gaia, and that's what they drink. So the success of this wine made us understand immediately what potential there is, because also it's a wine that age very, very well. So it is our ethic of making wine. It's the variety, but it's also the soil, it's the climate. There is a potential for making serious white wines in this region. There are producers making white wines and in a more and more serious way, even though still is not a tradition of Barolo and Barbaresco. We don't have a local variety. And so right now there is a trend. There is a focus on Timorasso. So there are many producers of Barolo that have been focusing, and they bought land 40 minutes far away from here on Colli Tortonesi in direction of Alessandria, where Timorasso, this white grape, is coming from. And so it's becoming a little bit the white wine of the Barolo and Barbaresco producers. We have a long history with the Gaia with Chardonnay. So in these 40 years of making it, there is a lot that we learn. And so we will continue to focus on Chardonnay. Our idea is that probably also considering the weather, how is it, it's important to move a bit higher in altitude. So our historic vineyards of Chardonnay it comes from one vineyard that is in Treviso. Treviso is one of the villages of Barbaresco and is the highest in altitude. So in 1979, when we planted our first vineyard of Chardonnay, that one was the highest spot we had. And then in 1988, we bought a land in Serralunga in the Barolo area. And so the year after, in 1989, we planted, and we are also there. We are 450 meters of altitude. We planted the vineyard there as well. So Gaia continued to be from these two vineyards. But in 2015, we did a move. We bought an abandoned hazelnut field 20 minutes far away from Barbaresco. So from the village of Barbaresco, you drive up to the village of Treviso. After Treviso, the borders of the denomination Barbaresco end. The hills, they keep growing higher in altitude. And in 10 minutes drive from there, you arrive in a village called Trezzo. Trezzo means nothing to wine lovers because that has never been the wine region. That has always been a region too high in altitude to make grapes right. So we're talking about 650 meters of altitude. So it's been the area of hazelnuts, meadows, woods. In the last 10 years, some colleagues of ours, they started to buy land in this area of Langhe, higher in altitude, Alta Langa, higher respect to Barolo and Barbaresco, and is growing the production of sparkling wines. Our idea is not to make a sparkling wine, but we really believe that perhaps in the future, Chardonnay and also Sauvignon Blanc can have more of a potential up there. And so in 2015, we planted some Chardonnay, some Sauvignon Blanc. The first harvest was 2019. So it's already few vintages that we produce Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc in higher altitude. The results are very promising. There is not just there is more acidity, but the quality of the acidity is very interesting. It's sweeter, it's rounder. So for now, Gaia remains from these two historic vineyards. But it's not sad and it will continue to be like that. It's also possible that in the future, that Chardonnay that now we use for Rossi Bas, perhaps in the future years would be also used for Gaia.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, I think that also white wines in Barolo and Barbaresco don't have a future because this is the land of Nebbiolo. But the Alta Langa, the high altitude Langa can become a Côte d'Or that Barolo and Barbaresco never had. There is a potential. The soil is not that different from Barolo and Barbaresco.
Yeah, no, I've had some really exciting wines, both white and red, coming from up there, which is great, and also some exciting Timerasso. So yeah, I'm excited to see what white wines come out of there, but also really excited to have more of your red wines now that I have your lens.
I know that we have to close, but I have to say one more thing. I think that there is going to be a lot of potential for white wines in the future, also considering the climate. Because the difficulty with the warmer and hotter and drier vintages for a red wine is to really achieve a balance between the technologic and the phenolic ripeness. You need to have ripe tannins. No, the skin has to be ripe. You don't have the tannins in a white wine. So it's one problem less for the whites. And also a blackberry is attracting a lot of heat. A white berry attracts a bit less. One thing that we never did in the past, but now we do, is also measuring the temperature of the juice in a berry in the summer. The temperature reach higher standard, higher levels on red grapes than not on white grapes. And we don't know yet the effect of that on taste. We don't know what this means. But I feel that for different reasons, the white grapes, they can have a very good potential for the future.
I guess one more question, just following up on that. Are you seeing this is a very nerdier question, but are not only the grapes getting hotter with the heat, is variation or the color change happening earlier as well, and that's prolonging that heat in the berry?
Yes, that's interesting. Yes, that's also the case, but that is not happening in every vintage. This year we're very behind schedule. This year, for example, we had a very dry and hot winter, but then from March on it's been raining nonstop and it's been averagely cool. So this year it's on a typical climate change vintage.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for the time. We typically, we're not trying to rush you out. We basically don't want to take any more of your valuable time. But thank you so much for joining. This was so insightful.
Thank you. It was great.
All right. That was our interview with Gaia Gaja. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I know it was a fascinating interview for me. I really want to go get one of their Barbarescos now. That was such a beautifully painted picture there. But for now, if you want to try many of Gaia's wines, you can go buy them and then try them without even popping the cork by using your Corvin. Corvin allows you to taste without having to consume a whole bottle at any one sitting. So definitely recommend checking out Corvin to go through your Gaias, and that way you can savor them for a long period of time. But that, for now, is our episode for this week. We will be back with another episode next week. Cheers.